Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hélène Soret. I'm one of the co-founders of inoqo, and I will be your moderator today. Many grocery retailers are currently facing pressure to comply with reporting deadlines and requirements such as CSRD or SBTi. They often use category representative emission factors to calculate the impact of their food product, meaning that all their pizzas, for example, are showing the exact same impact value, no matter if the pizza is full of cheese and meat or if it's a vegan pizza. The webinar today will be focusing on exactly this topic, on the benefit and on the challenge of using category average values for food impact assessment. To talk about this topic, I am very honored to have Andrea Roberto Rota, sustainability expert at the leading Swiss grocery retailer Migros, who will share the real journey how Migros launched their M-Check in 2016 using category representative emission factors and what challenges they faced. Together with Markus Linder, CEO of inoqo, they will discuss the limitations of category representative emission factors, but most importantly, they will present some solutions. Andrea Roberto Rota is the sustainability expert at Migros. After a master's degree in agricultural science and several years in the industry, Andrea joined the Migros sustainability team in 2019. After managing several projects in the areas of animal welfare and sustainable procurement, he took over responsibility for the Migros-wide strategy to reduce agricultural emissions. Markus Linder is the CEO and founder of inoqo. He's an impact entrepreneur, impact investor, founder, and keynote speaker with a rich experience spanning over 15 years in the startup scene. He founded his first startup, Zoo, in 2006, which rapidly scaled to become a global market leader, securing over $200 million in venture capital. He recently has redirected his focus towards addressing some of the most pressing challenges of our time, the biodiversity and the climate crisis. In 2020, he founded his second venture, inoqo, a retail solution designed to help grocery retailers, F&B brands, and food suppliers in assessing and communicating the impact of their food product across the entire value chain. So very warm welcome to the both of you. Maybe let's go into the agenda. The agenda today will be divided into 4 main parts. We have tried also to create a kind of a dialogue between Markus and Andrea. So first, Andrea will talk a little bit about the history of M-Check and his experience with category representative values. Markus will then provide background about the limitation using those category representative values, but also provide some solutions. And then they will discuss both of them about assessing food impact with product-specific impact assessment. And Markus will finish or complete the discussion with a presentation on inoqo product impact assessment platform. As usual, we always take the time at the end to answer any question you may have. So I really highly recommend you just drop your question during the webinar in the chat, and we make sure to get enough time at the end to answer those. So without any further ado, let's get started. Andrea, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. And thank you, Hélène, for the nice introductory words. First of all, I'm really happy that I can be here and share some insights about Migros' journey on the way to net zero. And why am I here? I think it's key that we all work together in this goal, and I think it's very nice possibility for me to share my experience we have in this field so that you might benefit from it. First, some words about Migros. As Hélène mentioned already, we are the biggest retailer here in Switzerland. We are also the biggest employer here in Switzerland with about 100,000 employees. We are organized as a cooperative with about 2.3 million members, and we are organized in 10 regional cooperatives all over Switzerland. Next slide, please. Migros is engaged in several fields, and we have grouped them in 5 strategic main fields. We have our core business. This is food retail, and Migros doesn't only sell, but we also produce a lot of our products by ourselves with our Migros industry. In addition to our food retail, we also have Hotelplan, our own travel agency. We have the Migros Bank, our own financial institution, and we have a huge part non-food retail with electronics, garden, sports, books, and so on. And as a rather new branch, we are also expanding in the field of health with our own fitness studios, our own pharmacies, and so on. And you can only see we are not only operating in Switzerland, we also have Europe-wide operations with our industry or with our travel agencies, or we also have stores in Germany and France. And the field, as mentioned before by Ellen, where I'm working is here, the orange part between the Migros industry and the Migros retail, where the biggest part of Migros emissions are costs in the scope 3 of our assortment, and mainly, as you might imagine, caused by flag emissions. Next slide, please. As you might imagine, drafting a sustainability strategy for such a large, complex, and diverse organization is rather challenging, especially if you take into account that in the end, we are still organized in 10 regional cooperatives, which adds another field of complexity besides the broad set of business services where we're operating. Nevertheless, we succeeded, and we have several different levels of our strategy. Of course, we have the legal requirements we have to fulfill in sustainability. Then we drafted group requirements that are mandatory for all the businesses within Migros Group, no matter if they are bank, Hotelplan, a travel agency, or the retail branch. And then we defined some specific focus topics for the individual units, all grouped in these 4 categories you see here, but with different target levels. So we undertook a lot of initiatives improving the sustainability of our products concerning animal welfare, biodiversity. We do a lot concerning climate and energy efficiency with logistics, with our stores, with our production facilities. We take measures concerning the circularity of our products, and we also invest a lot in social cohesion. All in all, this includes about 50 individual targets tailored to the individual company within our group. And concerning climate, our most important target is the net zero by 2050. Next slide, please. How are we progressing on our journey towards net zero, and what are the steps we are doing along our value chain? The most important part is right at the beginning, the sourcing of our raw material, where we undertook a lot of measures to reduce the flag emissions on one side by directly launching projects, especially together with the Migros industry, but we also have a large focus on supplier engagement, where we try to convince as much of our suppliers as possible to commit to their own science-based targets. Concerning distribution and transport, we try to reduce our air transport. We try to use alternative fuels for our trucks, hydrogen or electricity. Concerning the emissions from our stores and warehouse, we switched to 100% renewable energy. And of course, we also undertake a lot of measures where we try to help our consumers to make the sustainable decision. And there we have, Ellen mentioned it already in the introduction, launched the M-Check some years ago. You see it here in the top right corner. The M-Check is a Migros own sustainability rating we introduced on all our own brand products, where we assess different sustainability dimensions like animal welfare, climate, or sustainable packaging. With a 1 to 5-star rating, known by hotel ratings or other ratings, we make communication about the sustainability of our products towards our consumers and help them with that to make the sustainable decision. Not as important for us, since in the end, the consumer has the biggest leverage to reduce carbon emissions of Migros Group. And now the important questions: how are we gathering the data we need to assess our products concerning their carbon footprint? Next slide, please. And here's also the point where our current collaboration with inoqo started. Currently, we are working with a category average approach. How is this going along? We have the data about our product stored in our product information system. We have in the food retail about 35,000 articles. Then we take the data from this product information system to calculate group-based emission factors. First priority, we give to every article an emission factor based on its GPC classification. This means all the articles in the Migros assortment with the same GPC brick get the same emission factor. If the article has a GPC brick not very common and not very often used, we probably don't have specific emission factors, and there we use a category average emission. How did we calculate the emission factors on GPC level or on category level? Well, we looked on the articles making out at least 50% of the turnover within a brick or a category, and then our consultancy calculated the emission factors mainly using generic emission factors from data like EcoInvent or the World Food Life Cycle database. Then we use these data, as mentioned before, on one side to distribute the M-Check stars, and on the other side, they're also used to calculate our greenhouse gas inventory we need for our science-based targets. This process is still mainly done manual. This means manually. This means on one side, it's really time consuming, especially if you take into account the huge numbers of articles we have. And on the other side, there are some mistakes that happen. And that's the reason we started with parts of our category to work with the inoqo solutions. Because obviously, what are the limitations of the current manually and average-based emission factors we are working with? First of all, it's static data. This means in the end, we calculated emission factors once, but in the end, no improvements done by our suppliers are taken into account. And since we need somehow data where we can show the progress we and our suppliers have done, we need some more dynamic data. And the other problem is the low granularity if we work with average data. This is the main problem is we can't really make any distinctions between two articles of the same category. This is especially a problem concerning the M-check. I always use the example of hummus. This has the brick dip sauce, and we have dip sauces based on cream like crème fraîche, and we have hummus based on chickpeas. And currently, with this system we use, both of these articles have the same emission factors, despite if you look closely at ingredients, they probably should have rather different ratings. Yeah, and these shortcomings of the current version, our M-check, are the key reason we started our collaboration with inoqo. And on the next slide, you might see a picture how in the end this M-check is used in the shelf. You have here an example of cream with an animal welfare rating of 3 stars and a climate friendly rating of also 3 stars. Yeah, and after these introductory words about Migros and the current challenge we face concerning carbon data, I would like to hand over to Markus.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and also thank you very much for everyone joining us, despite the fact that we're in the middle of the summer period where probably most people are on vacation. I'm very much looking forward to now, after this view from Andrea, share a little bit more about our solutions from inoqo and how we see these challenges that the industry is facing, and also talk about solutions that we're offering in this space. On the next slide, we can basically see that inoqo is a software as a service company that provides solutions to the grocery retail industry to help manage the sustainability impact of the entire assortment. We assess the product life cycle at ingredient level and report carbon emissions, also expand the solution towards other impact dimensions, and we are 100% laser focused on the food and beverage grocery retail industry, which is really important to us. On the next slide, I would like to talk a little bit about the challenges that we are seeing, and Andrea basically pointed out some of these challenges already in his introduction. What we really hear from retailers is that they are challenged because of this lack of granularity. Andrea brought that great example earlier, that every tip sauce, no matter whether it's a plant-based hummus or a product that's very intense in animal-based, milk-based products, dairy-based products, get the same value, and that's obviously a challenge. But also what we see is that retailers struggle with inconsistency, because usually it's a lot about mixing and mapping. Some values are taken from database A, others are taken from database B, which leads to inconsistencies that are really problematic, especially if you want to start bringing in then primary data from your producers, which is a challenge that we see. We also see that retailers don't really benefit, taking the current approach, don't really benefit from what's going on overall in the industry. So, these emission factors from these databases are usually rather static. So even if over time the land use change, from the last 20 years is going down, that's not necessarily reflected in those emission factors, or the fact that the electricity mix is getting greener and greener over time is not really reflected in those emission factors. And especially what we see, what's not reflected, is the fact that certain product categories are getting more and more climate friendly over time based on the composition alone. So, we see trends that in certain categories, climate intense ingredients are going to be reduced over time. And just by relying on those static emission factors from databases, you can simply not benefit from the progress that's anyway going on out there. And as we've also heard from Andrea already, it can be quite time consuming to really map the different categories or even specific products onto emission factors. And this is really a challenge when it comes to category-based reporting. But if we then look at retailers that in some areas already move towards product-specific reporting, here we really see the two main challenges, that there is a lack of incentive for the suppliers to share more and more primary data over time. I mean, we need to be very aware that in the end, it's not about reporting, right? We don't do this to report and to fulfill our reporting requirements. Most retailers will have to report on CSRD very soon. There's a whole bunch of NGOs waiting out there that will do nothing else than creating benchmark reports where they show which retailer in a certain country made how much progress in terms of the decarbonization. So reporting is just the first step, but it's really about demonstrating that a retailer can make progress and is moving into the right direction. And that really requires to take more and more primary data in, because in the end, 80% of the impact in the food and beverage area happen on the farm level. And only if we can incorporate the fact what's going on the farm level, we will, or a retailer will ultimately be able to make progress. But today, there's still a lack of incentive for the suppliers to share primary data. They get a lot of requests from different players who want that data in different formats. They don't really know why they should give it and provide it, and that kind of hinders process. And even worse, we see some suppliers being completely reluctant to share primary data to the retailers, because they're obviously worried that the retailers use that data to copy their products with their private label brand products. They're worried that the retailers understand even the pricing strategy more and understand more of that, but also they're worried that by providing more and more primary data, they might be even worse off with their products in comparison to just being assessed based on secondary data. Because if as a producer, I know that I'm sourcing from my cocoa beans from Cote d'Ivoire, and I know there is a high amount of land use change happening in Cote d'Ivoire for cocoa, I know that probably I'm better off if Migros just assesses my product based on average industry data. And this is obviously a real issue, because we can only make progress the more we look at primary data, because you can only improve what you can measure. I don't know, Andrea, maybe a quick question here to you from your practical perspective. Do you see, are these the challenges? Is there something missing? Do you want to add something to that slide from your practical perspective?
No, I think you really were able to wrap up precisely what are the shortcomings of the current situation.
Perfect. Then we can move on to the next slide, where you basically see an example of a retailer that would use one average emission factor for all kind of pasta sauces, no matter whether they are full of tomato, full of cheese, or full of beef. And obviously, to comply with SBTi and with CSRD, it's totally fine to use those category averages that also Andrea mentioned earlier. But the big issue that we see is that you cannot really make progress. You cannot really demonstrate that you're moving forward, because no matter whether your suppliers are reducing the amount of beef in their bolognese, you don't see that reflected in your scope 3 emissions, because those values stay the same. No matter whether suppliers invest into more sustainable packaging materials, they switch to green electricity, especially SME suppliers, you don't really benefit from those good work that the suppliers are already doing, and you cannot really incentivize those suppliers for doing more of that work. So while this category-based approach is enough to report in a compliant way, retailers who focus on purely reporting based on category averages will really suffer, because they cannot demonstrate that they are making progress, especially not with their SME customers. And with SME customers in the food and beverage industry, we really see billion-euro companies that are just sitting there and waiting and not moving on the sustainability topic, because they're just saying, hey, everyone wants some different data from me. We're waiting until we really have to do something. And we really believe that the retailers need to take the producers along and help them on that journey. As you, Andrea, mentioned earlier, we are all into this together. We need to collaborate. We need to work with each other, because this is the only way how we will ultimately make progress. And yeah, but that's just to wrap up on the challenge here. If we go to the next slide, I want to dive a little bit deeper on the journey that we enable retailers to embark with our technology. So we enable retailers to basically start assessing the impact of their products based on a category representative emission factors, and this is a new product that we are just launching now. So we provide the most representative and dynamic emission factors on a category-based level now, and I will dive a bit deeper on that. But we then also enable retailers like Migros to dive deeper into certain product areas or product categories based on the data they already have available today, so the public product data, where we already take ingredients, composition, and the production process into account. And then in a third step, to really dive deeper in critical categories to collect more and more primary data from the suppliers. And here our methodology also brings along the right incentives that really foster the provision of primary data. And I'm going to walk you through this process a bit more in detail now in the next slides. So on the next slide, we can see that we basically offer 3 products, and you need to imagine these 3 solutions. So you start with inoqo category assessment plus across your entire assortment as a retailer. This is basically an offering where we offer most granular, dynamic, category-based, also retailer-specific representative values for a very granular set of categories. But then you can dive deeper with inoqo product assessment, where we take into account the data you have available today for a part of your assortment where it really makes sense and where you can really see progress. And then for even a subset of the category, we enable you to go out, collect more and more data, primary data from the suppliers, and get even down to the most granular level. Now I'm going to dive in deeper into the inoqo category assessment plus, where we can get started now with the next slide. So what do we do here with this new offering? I'm going to explain it in a very simplified form. Basically, we take a look at what does a category out there, what do the products in a category out there on the European supermarket shelves typically look like? So what does a fruit yogurt look like? Or what do fruit yogurts typically look like? What do vegan pizzas look like? What ingredients are included in vegetarian products and which are in meat-based, for example, pizzas included? So we create highly representative category representative products, which we then can feed through our assessment engine, and I'll share a bit more details about that later on, which allows us to really provide you with highly granular category-specific emission factors that allow us to differentiate between, to take the country of retail into account, like we take into account things like the recycling rate in the country of retail. We take into account the electricity mix of the country of production of the product. But we can really do that, at scale for tens and hundreds of thousands of products in a very cost-effective way. And this is basically the starting point. So on the next slide, we basically see the benefits. So as I already mentioned, the data is highly representative. So we really take into account what does a fruit yogurt typically look like, or what does the average representative fruit yogurt look like at the shelf. We can, in comparison to the data that's used today, significantly increase the granularity within the categories. So not just have one emission factor for pizzas, but go deeper and have a dedicated emission factor for vegan pizzas, for vegetarian pizzas, for meat-based pizzas, and thereby allow you to assess the products in a much more granular way, despite the fact that we are just still talking about category-based data. But then we can also take country-specific factors into account. So for single ingredient products, like whether the meat is sourced from Argentina, from Switzerland, or from the Netherlands, we take that into account, and you have, we apply the country or farming specific emission factors when we assess those products. Or for multi-ingredient products, we also take the local import-export mix into account with respect to the country of production. So although we don't take into account specific ingredients and the specific country of origin of the ingredients, because it's just category representative values, we still take a look, okay, where are the ingredients that typically go into a product in that domain, in that area, where do they typically come from? And we take that into account. We also take into account the local electricity mix of the country of production, of the country of retail, the retail location for stuff like recycling rates, the disposal stage is influenced here by the retail location. So, you know, it goes way beyond just using emission factors from different databases out there, but really allows a much more granular and accurate assessment. On the next slide, we can also see that, you know, we have an extensive coverage because we have emission factors for hundreds of agricultural raw ingredients across 200 territories. And it's also very time saving because our solution already provides the products mapped onto those, you know, with the respective emission factors per product. So that takes away a lot of time that today is spent by retailers or consultants to map categories or map products onto emission factors. And what's also key is that we on a regular basis update the values, the emission factors, to also take into account change in terms of land use change. So when we see over the years that deforestation is going down, this is reflected in your scope 3 emissions. Or if the electricity mix in the country of production is improving, this is reflected in the results. Or if we see, as mentioned earlier, that there's less ham, less salami on the pizzas, this goes into your basically, or this is something that you benefit from as a retailer, where you see that actually the emissions are going down, which doesn't happen if you just use, you know, typically static category representative values. I don't know, Andrea, maybe you want to comment on that from your perspective, from a practical perspective. Maybe you can share some insights where you, from a practical point of view, see the benefits here, and yeah, dive a bit deeper on that.
Yeah, I mean, the benefits are relatively obvious, especially compared when we look at the shortcomings of our current solution. First of all, it's automatic. We don't have to spend any person on doing the things manually. It also reduces the number of mistakes. We have way more granularity than we have today. That is also something important to point out. With the MCheck, we are not only communicating towards our consumers, but it's also an interesting rating for our category managers, because we really realized as a sustainability department that such a rating also has a huge impact on our procurement department and on the category managers, because they realize, hey, my product has only 2 stars. What do I have to do to get 3 stars, or thing like that? So you really see some sort of, yeah, let's say gamification effect you can have on the responsible persons for the categories. And what I personally really like about the inoqo solution is it works with data already available. I mean, it works with the ingredients, it works with the nutrient levels of the products, and those are all things you mandatory already have in your systems because you have to do it legally. Yeah, I think that are my comments on the benefits of the inoqo solution.
Thank you, Andrea. And I really like the fact that you're addressing that having like such a sustainability rating like MCheck really is not only about really the consumers, but it's also about your procurement teams wanting to make more sustainable decisions, bringing more sustainable products on the shelf. And I think this is really very powerful. And yeah, will also drive a lot of change. But obviously, you can only drive change into the right direction if you have more granular data, and if you can see the difference between a vegan pizza, a vegetarian pizza, and a meat-based pizza. Because if you don't, you might even optimize into the wrong direction. On the next slide, we also would like to share, obviously, and talk a bit about the limitations of this category assessment approach, because Obviously, this approach does not yet really allow you to differentiate between two products within the same category, apart from, you know, taking the country of retail and taking the country of production into account. So every fruit yogurt that comes from the same country of production and is sold in the same country of retail has the same value. It also does not really bring rewards along that would push suppliers towards starting to collect more and more primary data and to invest into more sustainable products. And the country of farming, although that's taken into account for single ingredient products like beef or like the milk, you know, where we differentiate based on the country of farming, actually. This is not taken into account for multi-ingredient products. And although you can capture industry-wide trends, like, you know, the electricity mix going down, deforestation going down, basically you're missing out on the supplier-specific improvements that go beyond what the industry is doing on average. Because if, you know, lots of your suppliers are moving to green electricity in their production facilities, you will only see that to a small extent as the overall industry is moving to green electricity, or the grid mix is changing to green electricity. If they invest into more climate-friendly packaging for their products, you will only see that based on the category, on the industry average, but not based on the specific work your suppliers are doing. And if they start to substituting high-impact ingredients like beef by more and more plant-based substitutes, you don't really benefit from that beyond what we're seeing going on overall on average across the market in Europe. So this is why on the next slide, we will see why we believe it's really important to then, in those categories where it makes sense, overcome these limitations by going into a specific product assessment with inoqo product assessment and inoqo product assessment plus, where you really recognize then the incentive and incentivize the supplier level improvements, where we can gain more granular product specific insights, and where we can really drive the development forward. So inoqo product assessment, inoqo product assessment plus, how does that work? Let's dive deeper. Next slide, please. Basically, we start, as Andrea already mentioned, with the data available today. We then use our own inoqo impact database to assess the products on the inoqo platform. And then we provide retail customers like Migros two values. One is a value that's for reporting, so CSRD, SBTi, and the other one is for consumer communication. But then we enable our retail customers to engage with their supply chain, collect more and more data over time, and basically, go improve, let's say, the impact of those products. Next slide. So how does that work? We basically start with the public data, like the ingredients, the nutrient values, the labels, the country of production. And we have an AI-based algorithm that allows us to basically estimate in a very accurate way what's the composition of that food product. So how much sesame seeds, how much sunflower oil, how much chickpeas go into that hummus. And initially, we assess this product based on the public import-export mix in the country of production. And we do that for all the ingredients, but also for the processes that go into the production and distribution of this product. So the transport, the packaging, and much more. But initially, as long as we use secondary data, we add a margin of safety onto all of those emission factors. And we do that because we want to avoid our customers be called out for greenwashing by communicating the impact of a large amount of products at the shelf in an overly positive way. And because we want to create a strong incentive towards the suppliers to share more and more and more primary data with us over time. And this is what the suppliers can do with inoqo Product Assessment Plus, where they basically can share the country of origin of their ingredients, the exact composition of the product, where they can share, increasingly share more and more insights about their production, like the electricity mix, primary data around packaging, and much more. And typically, the more primary data we get, we can replace those margin of safety by the actual primary data, which usually leads to the impact, the communicated impact of a product going down. We obviously only do that for the consumer and supplier communication value. For reporting, we don't add this margin of safety. Here we use the average values. Yeah, on the next slide, we can see that we use our own database, which offers us country-specific emission factors. So this database consists of data for 160 different agricultural row crops, hundreds of processes from around 200 territories from around the world. It covers, in reality, hundreds of thousands data sets if you take the combinations into account. And here we really use data sources like FAO Stat, or Aquastat, or International Fertilizer Association to calculate the average impact of ingredients, like, for example, the cocoa that goes into some of the fruit yogurts, based on what's actually really going on average in the respective country of production. So we could take into account the land use change in a certain country for a certain crop. We can take into account the fertilizer use and fertilizer production for that crop in a specific country. And the fact that we have this granular and highly consistent database also allows us down the road to replace country averages by specific primary data provided by suppliers. And this is really key in the mid to long term if you want to reduce the impact of your products. Next slide, please. So this is basically just to sum up, how inoqo product assessment and inoqo product assessment plus come together. On the left side, you can see that we start assessing the fruit yogurts by taking already ingredients into account, by taking the country of production into account. But through inoqo product assessment plus, we can now collect data from the suppliers around, what's the country of farming, where the ingredients come from, what does the energy mix look like. We can take into account the food waste that's happening at the store, packaging details, and this way assess the product in a more and more granular way. And the interesting thing is that we here offer a platform that allows the suppliers to feed in this data and share that data with us in confidence. We don't share the highly, secret and confidential supply chain secrets of the producers with the retailers, because obviously the suppliers don't want Migros to know their exact recipe and where the ingredients come from, because they obviously have reservations against it. The suppliers can share that data with us, and we then share it with all our retail customers who have listed that product in a consistent way. Yeah, on the next slide, we now basically have a summary of those benefits of product assessment and product assessment plus. So here we now, by really looking at the specific ingredients of a product, the specific production processes of the product, have the opportunity that as a retailer, you can differentiate between products within the same category. So you can really differentiate from fruit yogurt to fruit yogurt, from vegan pizza to vegan pizza, because we take the ingredients, the composition, and the production processes into account. Also, from a country of farming perspective, for multi-ingredient products, we can take the country of farming here into account, just to use it as an example. And retailers can really capture supplier-specific ingredients. So improvements. So the more suppliers switch to green electricity, the more suppliers switch to climate-friendly packaging, switch to low ingredient substitutes. For example, remove the content of beef in the bolognese and reduce that and move towards more plant-based ingredients. That really can be reflected in the scope 3 emissions of the retailer. And at the same time, adding this margin of safety, in absence of primary data, we have a very strong incentive built in for the producers to share more and more primary data with us over time. Maybe Andrea, you brought along 2 screenshots of 2 products that Migros is assessing based on our inoqo technology. maybe you want to share some insights on how you're using that data and what you're deriving out of that.
Yeah, thanks a lot. The category-based approach, I mean, it's a great approach to easily get your baseline for drafting your science-based target. But to get back on the example of a category manager coming to me and asking how can I improve my rating for my products from 2 to 3 stars with a category average, this is obviously not possible. There we have to have a close look at the product and at the ingredients and use a product-based approach. And I have here the screenshots of 2 of the pizzas from a Migros pizza assortment. And with the current scheme, based on a GPC and category average levels, this pizza here has the same emission factor than a pizza that contains meat, for example. What we see here is a vegetarian pizza. And now with the inoqo product level assessment, we are, based on the ingredients that we have available in our database, we can differentiate between a vegetarian pizza and a pizza with salami on the next slide. And yeah, you see the difference in emissions are rather high, and currently with the average level assessments we are doing, this works for the overall picture for our greenhouse gas inventory. But if you're thinking about communicating towards our consumers, this is a rather big shortcoming of the current scheme.
Yeah, that's something I totally agree. And I believe it's really important that in the end we remember that retailers have 4 big levers they need to pull really so that we really can see progress in the end. And it's really about making your own private label brand products more sustainable by seeing where do the emissions come from, what are the hotspots, which ingredient contributes to which extent to the impact, and then taking action. But it's also about really pushing upstream with regards to the A brand suppliers to incentivize them making their products more sustainable. And here really see this margin of safety approach as a very strong incentive, because they understand the more primary data they provide and the more they invest into making their products more sustainable or more climate friendly, the more, the better rating they will get. And the more you as a retailer can actually then use that data to drive consumption towards the more climate friendly products. What we see, and maybe Andrea, you can also share something about that, where you see the industry heading here is, that retailers are using that data to rank more climate friendly products higher in their search results, or to rank them higher in the online shops within the categories, or to really consider the impact of products for promotion decisions, for marketing decisions. So once you have the data at that level of granularity, there's a whole range of areas where you can really apply the data to make a difference and to push basically the whole scope 3 emissions down. And yeah, not sure if you have any additional insights on how this data can be leveraged.
I totally agree with what you said concerning that you really can specially promote products with a high rating. Currently, we aren't doing this yet for the climate M check, but we do it, for example, already for the animal welfare M check. For example, there is a ban for our category manager to make any promotion for products with a 1-star animal rating. But of course, this is a scheme we could also use for the climate M check. But I think first we really need to improve the data quality and intensifies the current collaboration between inoqo and Migros.
Yeah, and I mean the third topic that's really crucial to us, and here we really see you as a big pioneer with MCheck, is really this topic of communicating the impact to consumers. Are there any insights that you might be able to share? Because sometimes the question is, do consumers really care? Do they react based on labeling? Is there anything you can share? Do you see consumers basically, choosing in a different way since you launched mCheck?
Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to share any numbers, but in the end, the results that we were observing were rather promising, and we really were able to see an effects on certain categories. Those was really astonishing to me. Honestly, I didn't expect it in the first place when we introduced the mCheck that it really would have this effect. But I mean, in the end, not only for Migros, but for all the retailers, we have to take the consumers with us on this journey, because otherwise we won't be able to succeed with reaching our climate reduction targets. No way.
Totally agree on that. If we all continue to eat the massive amount of meat and dairy products that we consume today, then yeah, there's no way to achieve the goals. Yeah, Ellen.
Thank you to both of you. We're perfectly on time. We have 10 minutes for the questions. I think what's very important to keep in mind is no matter where you are as a retailer, there is always a way to start, and category average representative values are a good way to start, but they are not the end of the project. So what is important and what we see with all our customers is the idea of adding more and more granularity over time to really show some improvement. But I have two interesting questions, and feel free to add more if you have in the meantime. But the first one, if category assessment plus, so your product offering is first selected and we want to switch later to the product assessment, how does the process look and what kind of additional data requirements are needed? Maybe it's a question for you, Markus, but you can certainly talk about this, Andrea, since you went through this.
Yeah, definitely. So we typically try to already get from our customers the data, the basic data that we need for product assessment, for the inoqo product assessment offering already when going live with the category assessment. So in theory, for the category assessment, you could get started just based on product name and GTIN, article number, and some category related data. But as we are working on technology that allows us to cluster products or categorize products in a more granular way, we already ask our customers to also already at this point provide us the ingredients, the order of ingredients, the nutritional values. Anyway, the data that has to be available from a legal perspective. And this allows us to then basically seamlessly go deeper because we already have that data available, and we seamlessly can then, you can basically decide and say, okay, I will have now these 10, 15, 20, whatever categories where I see a big discrepancy within the category, where I know that our suppliers are actually actively working on decarbonizing their products. And then let's dive deeper there. And in the first step, you can just do that based on inoqo product assessment, based on the legally required data that you already have available today. And for those categories where it really makes sense to then go deeper with inoqo product assessment plus, here we can take in primary data from you through an API, where we then receive information like what we typically see is that retailers have data like the composition of their private label brand products, or for example, also the country of farming of some key ingredients in their products, or some packaging information. Whatever data is available here in terms of primary data, we can take it in through an API. But then we also can engage with the suppliers through our platform where they can provide more and more data to us directly for inoqo product assessment plus. So it's basically a seamless journey where actually, you can start easily with the data you have available today and then dive deeper. And as you dive deeper, we connect basically to your private label brand database or PIM system. and then engage with your suppliers directly to collect more and more data. I hope that answers that question. I don't know, Andrea, if you want to add something on that.
I mean, from a practical perspective, I think it's a very elegant way to introduce inoqo into your category, to first start with the category assessment and then really selective you start to introduce the product assessment. Because I mean, there are categories where it's actually no problem to use an average value. Let's say, for example, if I look at our bread assortment, there most breads have a very similar emission factors. But if we, let's say, switch to convenience food, there the ingredients of the product really make a difference. And I think that's also, yeah, I think it's a great approach to do it like that, to really do a category assessment and then focus with the product assessment on the categories you really need detailed emission factors.
Thank you, Andrea, actually, for adding this point, because the idea why we decided to provide also this new offer came after a talk we had with a customer, exactly as you mentioned, who had, I don't know, hundreds of different breads and very local product. And obviously he didn't want, because, you know, product impact assessment can be also relatively expensive if you have an assortment of over 100,000 product SKUs. And this is exactly why we said for those products which have, you know, limited impact range, because it's very similar emission factor, we decided to go for that. So it's actually a very good point. Thanks for bringing that.
Also, wine is a great example where you have, you know, some retailers have hundreds of wine products. Yeah, where anyway there is a limited amount of ingredients, and where it just simply doesn't make sense to go deeper for all of these wines, knowing that the result would be very similar.
Especially since that exact retailers was taking the wine from local producers, so there was really very little to. Okay, then we have the second question. Is the category product assessment given by inoqo updated for retailers if the data in your database is updated? So basically, do we update the data in our database?
Yes, absolutely. So our database is updated on an ongoing basis. We just, for example, had an update where new scientific findings came out about I think it was like the amount of carbon that can be sequestered by trees. And, you know, whenever this new data becomes available, we basically put that in, or we update our database, and then we reassess the products for our customers. So you will really see change over time based on the latest scientific findings, and also based on the progress that we see being made out there.
Okay. Perfect. I think that's it. I think we're done. Andrea, it was really a pleasure to have you, and thank you very much for all the insight. I mean, it's definitely helping the industry, helping other sustainability leaders like you to move forward. And it's a journey. It's not an easy one, but such an important one that having you on board and sharing your experience, sharing your challenge is really invaluable for us. So thank you so much from my side, and to also everyone who attended the webinar, and see you next time.
Enjoy your summer. Thank you very much, Andrea.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.